If you have ever been in front of a large group of kids, you know that if you're not careful, it can become chaos. When classroom management and engaging large group time is a challenge, sometimes we just need a little guidance. And if that's you, then this episode with Steve Bloom from the Park Curriculum should give you some practical handholds.
Hey there, and welcome to the KidzMatter podcast, your go-to resource for all things children's ministry. Each week, we bring you fresh ideas, inspiring stories, and practical insights to help you lead, love, and serve kids like never before. Whether you're just getting started or you're a seasoned pro, we're glad you're here. Let's get started.
I'm Hannah Augustine, and even though engaging a large group of kids is something that comes naturally to me, I always have room to grow. After 10 years in Kidmin, I've seen a lot of things. Some of them are probably too scary to name, and if you're listening, you've probably seen some wild things too. So I'm excited to hear the practical strategies that Steve has to share with us today. Before we jump in, I have to let you guys know that in July, we're diving into our Kidmin Academy class on effective teaching. So if you love today's episode and want to dive even deeper into this conversation, I'd love to offer you one free Kidmin Academy class. You can email our team at support@kidsmatter.com with the subject podcast free class to get the link, or you can visit kidminacademy.com. We offer a 25% off discount to our podcast listeners with the code podcast, and you'll learn more about what Kidmin Academy is on that site. Now, we're excited to have Steve here. He has been on both sides of the large group experience with 16 years of kids ministry experience that really positioned him to be the perfect executive producer for The Park, which is a brand new children's ministry curriculum. He specializes in large group experiences for elementary kids and apparently large group environments for pets because he and his family currently have 5 cats, 2 dogs, and 3 horses. Steve, that is a lot to take care of, and I'm just grateful you could join us in between all the vet appointments. I feel like there's a lot of care happening there.
For sure. And let's just say that you don't want to take your shoes off in our house.
That is fair. That is fair. We just went through a season with 5 cats, and we're currently down to 3.
Oh.
My mother-in-law took 2 of them, and we have 2 dogs. So lots of pets here at our house too. Now, as I mentioned, I've seen some things when it comes to large group environments. I've worked, with some small groups, maybe 20 to 35, and then with groups of over 100 kids in an elementary environment. I remember one night we had kindergarten through 6th grade. It ended up being around 100 kids. When we finished, I said, we're never doing that again. We've got to split these kids up because it was total chaos. And there are great ways that we can handle large group experiences, and there are terrible ways that we can do it as well. So to kick things off, what would you say are, 2 to 3 ways that we can create an environment where kids are engaged, but also, learning?
Okay. First, thank you so much for having me today, Hannah.
Of course.
It's awesome to be on the show with you. Great to meet you. I want to start really quick with an assault on my own credibility. I know that there are very gifted teachers. There are educators, there are pastors, there are people who have been trained, who have multiple degrees, grandmothers, grandparents, people who know how to teach and people who know how to relate to kids. And I am not about to tell you that you're doing anything wrong. I would never suppose to tell you that I've got a better way to do it or anything like that. I am just telling you what works for me, what's been successful, and just really volunteer to volunteer. Is that fair?
That's totally fair. I love it.
Okay, good. So the first thing to answer your question that comes to mind is it's a joke from the comedian Brian Regan. That I first heard probably 30 years ago. You familiar with Brian Regan?
I've heard his name. I don't think I've ever heard his content, so I'm looking forward to it.
This was a long time ago, and he's a great physical comic, and I'm not going to try to do the joke, but I'll just give the gist of it. He talks about how kids and adults relate differently. And he tells a story about a kid holding a balloon, and the balloon gets away from him and floats away. And the kid starts crying, and he's pointing at it and says he wants the balloon. And the adult's like, "What? Why are you crying? We'll get you another one, but I want that one." And he said, "Man, I think if adults could put themselves in the kid's shoes, what if the adult's wallet just started floating away?" And he started doing that same physical comedy thing. And he said, how would the adult react? And starts, running after it and everything. And they're like, what? Calm down. What's wrong with you? That's my wallet. Calm down. We'll get you another one. But I want that one. Again, Brian Regan does the actual joke, and it's very funny. But that, plus, I always go back to a time. All right, how about this? Have you ever heard of Richard Scarry books?
No. Oh, yes.
Oh,
Okay.
okay,
Those are the
okay.
ones I can picture the animation. Yes.
Yes, perfect. So animals living in normal society and conducting business, and they're pretty old, but they're these beautiful books with this amazing artwork, and they were a big part of my childhood. And so I remember one time I was reading one of them, and a cat was eating an ice cream cone and looking over the edge of a dam, but the ice cream had fallen off of the cone and it splattered on the ground, and the cat was just kind of looking at it. And I got the empathy gene bad. And I remember as a kid looking at that and my heart broke for the cat, for this little kid. And I went to my mom and I showed her and I said, I was upset. And she said, "Oh, it's okay, honey. His mommy will buy him another one." And I can still feel the relief that brought me. And my mom could have said, well, that's why we need to be responsible. That's why we need to use two hands. That's why we don't run. That's why we don't look over the edge, whatever. She could have used it for any kind of teaching lesson. But in that moment, she chose, I don't know, I just call it love, and made it all okay. And like I said, it's been 100 years since then, and I can still feel the relief that it brought me. And so those two things, when I started working with kids, those have kind of a big impact on how I relate to kids. They just see the world differently than we do. They're not burdened by 1040 forms and timesheets and, high cholesterol, but even on their best days, a lost balloon can be a big deal. A corrective brace, not fitting in, being the kid that does poorly in spelling bee, striking out, finding out a grandparent is sick, something like that. These are potentially earth-shattering moments for a kid. And we can't just, whatever, big deal, everyone strikes out. I think we need to meet them to see where their struggle is and help them process their experiences in a way that their developing minds will allow them. Fortunately, of course, we have the answer, right? We have the gospel. We have the truth of God's word, and it can help them through any situation that they face. So what we get to do is so huge because it's not only hope for eternity, it's hope for this life. So number one, I would say, is remember what life was like when you were in elementary. And you might have to stop and really think about that, and that your world is different than theirs, but the way that they're going to process things, you can probably dig back into those and make that connection. Number one is let kids be kids. Remember what life was like when you were in elementary. Step two is appeal to their imagination. I had a brilliant academic career until about third grade. And in third grade, I fell in love with a girl across the room, and I would ignore history class and math and everything, and I would dream about how we were going to get married and dream about our lives together. I would dream about how ninjas would come in and break into the school somehow, and I would fight them off. Yeah. So I have to say, it was pretty anticlimactic when I ended up meeting my wife and there were no ninjas involved. Actually, she's the one who could probably fight off the ninjas, but I don't know. It didn't quite work out that way. I was a daydreamer, and not every kid's a daydreamer, but I loved to, I would spend fifth grade just drawing pictures of epic battles between the U.S. and our enemies at the time, and tanks and planes and everything. And so I was a good student till probably about third grade. And then I just, my imagination just kind of took over. So I like to put kids in the story, or to invite them to put themselves into the story. I think about, you could teach the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000, but imagine what that's like for that kid that brought the loaves and the fishes. It wasn't his idea to bring a lunch with him. his mom sent him out the door with it, told him not to forget his hat and his jacket, called him back in a couple times and cleaned off the smudge on his face or something like that. And so when you tell that story, every kid can relate to their mom saying, take a snack or take a jacket or something like that. And then that kid got to be the hero as far as the people were concerned. Jesus, of course, is the ultimate hero of that story. But we talk about that kid now. And so the extension then is that we can have kids think about the part that they can play in leading someone to Christ or leading a stadium to Christ or something like that. They could do huge things for the kingdom, or they could do something small for the kingdom. You never know what it's going to be with something so small. Appeal to their imagination. There's a lot of different ways you can do that, but just invite them to just kind of paint that picture. One thing that used to drive me crazy when I was an elementary kid is when a teacher would say, put on your thinking caps. And it's something that I had a teacher that would say that. And I didn't know what it meant. I didn't have a cap I could put on or whatever. And maybe that's why, maybe I missed that lesson in third grade and maybe that messed up the course of the rest of my academic career. I don't know. But I didn't have a thinking cap. But if there are things that you can do to make that practical, then bring their imagination into it. And the last one is that you need to actually care. You need to remember that God put you in this role for a reason, and you may not feel like it at first. For me personally, it was a calling before it became a passion. It was something that I stepped up to do, and I really didn't know why I was doing it, and that there's more to that story. But one day, we were doing a Saturday night service at our church, and I had finished leading. And I'd kind of gotten comfortable into my groove, and a small group leader came up to me afterward, and she said, "Yeah, it was funny. We're doing a review with the kids, and the question was, who loves us?" And two of the kids went, "Mr. Steve." And of course, that was the wrong answer. But when she told me that, that's that whole speaking life into somebody. And it sent a current through me and added a challenge that now, it changed me that day in a sense of purpose, as opposed to just helping, being somebody helpful, a volunteer, a servant, something like that. So there's another lesson there. We know our words are very powerful. She was acting in the Spirit when she said that, and it really built me up. I don't think that caring is something that you can really fake. I think that it's something that you build. But I think it starts with just kind of taking that first step of obedience and just letting God work.
Amen. Those are 3 amazing tips. I think speaking from a place of love and care and support for these kids is the best place to start. And sometimes we have to take that first step. There are some kids that you are going to naturally, connect with and feel just that I really want to support and care for them. And there's some kids that may rub you the wrong way. It may be harder to invest in, but our calling are, from the Lord, but as a person, and how much more as someone who's leading in a ministry, is to love our fellow believers, to love the people that God puts in our path. And so when we can take that posture of love and care, our words are going to mean that much more, right? Because they're going to receive from us knowing Mr. Steve, Miss Hannah, they love me. And that means what they're saying matters to me. So that really is a beautiful posture to take. And if you're listening and maybe you're not there with some of your kids, I think the first tip that you shared, Steve, of letting them be a kid and remembering what it was like to be a kid, that really helps us have that compassion and empathy. I can vividly remember things that are so silly, but like feeling uncomfortable in certain pairs of shoes, because you're just little. You don't know what kind of shoes you like to wear, but your mom bought you the shoes, so you wear the shoes. And so you feel uncomfortable or you don't like the way they look or they're different from the other kids' shoes. And it's so silly, maybe to an adult, but as a kid, it was such a huge deal to feel like I don't fit in because of these shoes or the pants or the way my mom did my hair, or having to wear glasses and how sure, maybe as an adult, this makes sense, but in a kid's
Yeah.
brain, this maybe doesn't seem logical or sensical. So those
Yeah.
are those are some great tips as you guys are getting started with large group experiences. I know a big variable in large group experiences can be behavior challenges, unique learning styles, and then classroom disruptions. I would love to just work through that list, starting with those behavior challenges. What are like one or two practical strategies we can use when we're having a behavioral challenge in the room?
So when you say behavioral challenges and unique learning styles, to me, that's an equation that equals classroom disruptions.
Good
And
point.
for me, this is how it works. And so I know that there are professionals out there who know what they are doing and who are probably going to listen to me and be like, no, that is not right. I'm telling you what I do. And one of the guys that I kind of learned from, he and I have different styles here, and I respect him so much, and I'm never going to tell him, hey, you're doing it wrong.
Right.
Just, this is how I'm doing it. So a little bit controversial. I don't want church to be like school. School can be kind of a drag to some kids, but not every kid. And again, you're talking to the C student here. So, this is not coming from your valedictorian or your salutatorian. And, I think I did well just to pronounce those words. So you're talking to the C student, but I wasn't a particularly disruptive kid. I was just in my own world. You do have kids that are going to be daydreaming about ninjas. And I think it's important to teach kids to be polite and respectful. Like that's some of the values that they should be learning at church anyway, that they're probably not going to learn at school. But I never want church to feel like a drag, and for church to feel like that they're being embarrassed or singled out. And when I was a kid, there were all kinds of techniques, and I don't know if these are still used or not, but I remember having to go stand in the corner or something like that. A teacher knows all the kids' names, and it's very easy to, snap your fingers and point to Steve. And I remember that feeling, and I'm sure I deserved it whenever that happened. So I'm not going to make any excuses there, but I don't want to be the one doing that in church. I want church to be a completely different experience from school, where they can have a good experience or not have a bad experience, maybe. One day I was teaching, and it was a big room, and there was all of a sudden this loud exclamation. I mean, almost like a bark or something that came from my right. And it jarred me. I kind of stopped, like, what happened over there? Is somebody hurt? And all the kids, of course, do that, and they're all looking over. And it was kind of hard to see because in the room there were these bright lights, and all right, well, everything's fine. And so I kept going, and then there was this other loud exclamation. And then every minute or so it started happening. I'll be honest, I struggled getting through that one. I made it through it, but it was tough. And afterward, I went up to the person who's in charge. I said, man, what was that? And she said, oh, that's so-and-so. He's nonverbal. And when he gets stimulated, he exclaims. And the more he exclaims, the more into it he is. And he's picking up what you're putting down. And now it would have been nice to know that before, but, here I am making it all about me. And here's the kid I really want to reach. And another time, again, this is all about growth. Having the reps just makes you better at it anyway. And don't be discouraged if you have days like this. But on the left-hand side of the room, there was just this pocket of chattering and murmuring. And I'm kind of, I'm continuing to do it, but it's distracting me. And the whole time I'm teaching, there's this little voice inside my head that is analyzing the room or thinking about what I want to say next, or hoping that I remembered to wear matching socks or something like that. I don't know. And this is just kind of invading over here. And so I'm talking and I glance over. And a lot of times if there's a disruption, I can use my body and move it to that side of the room and kind of talk more directly to them. And I think that's one technique that does work really well, is trying to just capture their attention or vary your voice or something like that. In this case, there's all this murmuring and chattering, and nothing I was doing was going to work. And so again, I made it through it. And I saw that there was a small group leader with them. And so afterward, I went up to the leader again. I was like, hey, what was that? Like, oh, those are Miss So-and-so's foster kids. And they don't speak English, but that small group leader does speak English. And so she was translating everything that you were saying. So how horrible do I feel? Again, I mean, I'm just so blessed that they're there and that I have the opportunity to talk to them. And it's sometimes those more difficult to reach kids or something like that might cause the challenge. But those situations kind of force me to just be better at dealing with distractions. And our minds are capable of it. We are able to tune out things. We're able to continue to power forward. Part of that is being prepared.
Yes.
So that helps a lot. But in these cases, I actually got to the point where I wanted to hear more of it. If that one young man was in there exclaiming, and he was probably in the program for 3 years or so, and now, I mean, it's been years now, I saw he's in high school, and still is involved at church. I don't know to what extent because I'm not involved in that ministry, but I see him in the lobby from time to time. And I could have been a prima donna. I could have made that about me. And the flesh definitely wants to. And to say, he needs to be in a special program or something like that. Well, no. I mean, God brought him to my program, so I need to talk to him. And I'm ultimately, I just want to be a vessel for the Holy Spirit to speak through.
Amen.
I also respect the value of a good pressure relief. Sometimes you say something, and there was a very popular video game a few years ago, and you dare not mention it, and the word came out of my mouth, and I lost the room. I mean, it was epic. And now there's a moment of truth there where I can either, start smacking my hands and clapping my fingers and all of that and shouting at the kids or whatever, or I can ride the wave. And now I have also seen teachers use incredibly effective methods to get control of a room. They say, if you can hear me, clap your hands, or, something like that. And I've never been trained in those, and they work really well for them. So again, this is just my strategy. It's a great opportunity to just let the room kind of have this pressure relief. We were doing one thing with John the Baptist one time, and I had a small group leader dressed in a Duck Dynasty costume, and they were standing up on the stage, and I don't remember what happened, but something failed on the suspenders, and the pants just went boom, straight to the ground. And of course, they were wearing shorts underneath, but I mean, we couldn't have scripted it better. It was the funniest thing. And there was it's like, I'm not going to try to recover from this.
No,
we're going to lean into this. We're going to laugh at this because it's funny. And it's okay to laugh at this and let them laugh at it and let them know that you're in on their joke too. And that this isn't just their immaturity that thinks this is funny. This is, again, I'm relating with you. I'm on your level. This is legitimately funny. All right. Now let that kind of play out. Let that dissipate. And then figure out how we're going to get control of the room again. Now, a lot of times I can vary my voice, and I can drop my voice down a lot lower. If I'm speaking more quietly, then all of a sudden, other kids will have this fear of missing out, and they'll start telling the people around them to be quiet, and that spreads, and your kids become your greatest ally in bringing the energy back down and refocusing everybody. What I would say is when you do that, you better be ready with something compelling to say. Not just, boy, that was crazy, wasn't it? It needs to be something a little bit more poignant, and that'll come to you in the moment. And then finally, I think, of course, other leaders being in the room are your best friends. And sometimes they'll be so engrossed in the story that they'll forget that, hey, you got a job to do. But, that's where a pre-service meeting or something like that can go really well. Just to, hey, I get distracted easily, and I could really use your help just keeping order in here. But without, because all it takes is just kind of a lean over, hey, just refocusing their attention. And also, as leaders have their attention focus up front, that naturally is going to kind of have this magnetic draw to everyone else. I think it works a lot better than snapping your fingers and pointing or something like that. Now, sometimes there's just a behavioral issue that they just can't deal with, and that's when they need to bring a parent in or something like that, or the kid needs a break. That's going to happen. But if it's a kid playing with the Velcro on their shoes, I have to learn to tune that out. And any of those little distractors throughout the room, it is within your capability as a large group leader to overcome that. It takes practice, just like any of this, just like learning to care, learning to love. All of this takes practice. Dealing with and succeeding in dealing with the sound of Velcro or something like that makes you better for the next time and the next time. And eventually, what you thought was impossible, now you're actually pretty good at it.
I think you're right. Preparation is something that I think we underestimate, especially in children's ministry, when we have so much going on and you may be leaving your Sunday morning lesson prep to Saturday night at 10 p.m. And I would just encourage you, don't take the time to let that message get in your heart, get in your spirit. I would do my best if I was getting ready to teach in the kids area or wherever. I think we should be giving our best to any platform we're on, right? And so I would walk through, and there's a principle from Ken Davis. He has a book all about communicating. It's so good. And he talks about on your feet out loud, oiful. And when you practice, you're not just reading, you are on your feet out loud. He recommends in front of a mirror. And so I would try, 1, 2, 3 times to maybe the first 2 I'm reading. And then the third one, I'm kind of off script, making sure I'm comfortable, because then you're absolutely right. You can adapt on a Sunday morning, and learning which distractions need to be maybe addressed, which ones need to just ride the wave. I love that you've been giving freedom for people to know what works for them. Those of you listening, you know your environment better than either of us do. And so you know the techniques that work. But I think having the relief and taking the pressure off of the room has to be in perfect silence and accord for you to teach, because it doesn't. It is okay to let them have conversations or do the Velcro on their shoe or play with the table or whatever it is that maybe they need that's helping them actually listen because they're fidgeting, or that can help a kid actually take it in a little bit better. And then, like Steve said, finding some techniques, and these you could Google, you can figure out what works for you, but varying your voice, using body language, having those key phrases, even being able to say, oh, you're not going to want to miss this. And those things that are drawing kids in. And like you said, very great point on the kids being your allies. For the kids who are locked in, they may go, stop with the Velcro. I'm trying to hear him. And you're able to bring everybody's attention back. Something that I would do especially with a big class, but kind of to start off the lesson, is I would tell the Bible story as fast as I could. So I would get going, and it was hard because you're talking so fast, you almost can't think. But if it was, Adam and Eve, I would be like, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the world. It took 7 days, and there was stars and planets and da-da-da-da-da. And then Adam and Eve came, and they lived in the garden. And I would just, as far as I could go without tripping up too much. And they'd all be going, we don't understand. Down. And so it was funny. And then I would stop and say, oh, you didn't get that? Do I need to go slower? And that kind of helped, especially if you're coming off of a game, if you're coming off of worship where it was maybe a hyper song. Now I'm drawing them into, okay, this is what we're talking about. So you guys can find those things that are going to be you. Don't try to be me. Don't try to be Steve. Find some things that fit your personality and then use them, and have a couple of those things in your back pocket, because the same thing may not work in every situation. You're going to need some different things ready to help you when you're in maybe that disruptive moment. And like you said, Steve, I think the reminder that these kids that are maybe having a hard moment, whether it's a learning style or a language barrier or maybe a disability that affects the way they respond, they need to hear this. And in some ways, like you said, that's our primary audience, because if we can get to them, the other kids are going to be coming along for the journey. So having that heart for, how can I get to Andy or Tony or Sally? And maybe that's even having a conversation with them. Hey, Sally, I've noticed sometimes when I'm doing the lesson, it's kind of hard for you to listen. What could I do to help you want to hear this? Because I think it's the most important thing to learn about the Bible. Don't be afraid. Ask those questions, and that may help equip you for your specific audience.
A similar thing that we did with the kid that would have the outburst, we just, hey, let's go talk to him. And we just went up to him and said, hey, buddy, we're so glad that you came today. We're so glad you're in our program, and we're so happy every time you're in here. Just to let him know, and he could understand us, that we valued him and that he's welcome there. And that's, a lot of churches do this Night to Shine program. And I've gotten to volunteer in it. And it's people that are so marginalized in not just society, but in church too. And man, nobody should be marginalized in church, but that's really, really tough sometimes. And so when God brings somebody like that into the environment, yes, he's doing it for them, of course, but use it as an opportunity to just make yourself better at reaching them. Take it as a challenge and just roll up your sleeves, work harder. And it's even harder than you're already working, I know, but it was very rewarding when you handle it right.
And you mentioned kids are in the foster system or adopted or maybe struggling at home, when they can feel welcome and included in your environment. If they're not included anywhere else, they should be included at church.
Right.
And so
I may never see them again.
Yeah, right.
This might be their only Sunday there. So, I value all of them. But there's some that, all right, they're going to be here next week. They're going to be here the week after. But these kids, this may be our only chance with them.
And even learning, sometimes when you're teaching, discerning, is this a good moment for me to say, hey, Chad, oh, Chad, I hope you're getting this. Maybe Chad's not, you can tell Chad's not getting it. But maybe it's, oh, Chad, I hope you're getting this. This is for you. This is so good. And figuring out how to acknowledge even the great behavior, right? Sometimes we focus on the negative and the disruptive, but being able to say, oh my goodness, especially with a kid who maybe struggles to pay attention, find those moments to highlight. Chad, I can tell you're leaning in. That's so great. Or Sally, you are really listening, and I love seeing that. I know this means a lot to you. And then other kids go, oh, well, I want to be listening too. So then again, that's a win-win versus the negative of, Chad, listen up, stop talking. And okay, do you need to say that occasionally? Maybe. But if you can focus on the reward and the drawing them in, that's going to be so much better. Because what you said about in school, you'd be nose in the corner. I remember nose to the whiteboard, or getting called out for talking and feeling like I'm always a good kid. And the one time I was talking, I got in trouble. And just the shame that I felt in front of my peers, and even in middle school, of feeling so embarrassed and ashamed. And so we don't want to put kids in that position that they associate church with a feeling of shame.
Right.
And so even if you need to have that coaching moment, I would encourage you to do it before or after, not in front of a big group. Do your best to never correct in front of everyone. If there's a global correction, okay, fine, but not to single out one or two or three kids, because that doesn't sit well. It's going to leave them feeling ashamed and hurt.
But it does sit well when you were praising Chad in a positive way, when you call out Chad in a positive way. When you know a kid's name and you say it, that resonates.
Yes.
That's a big deal to them.
Especially
and there's
said in a positive light, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's these parasocial bonds that form one way, where your audience, you tell stories about you, your life, whatever, and your audience connects with you, but you're not connecting with your audience. Same thing happens in a large group. The kids form a bond with someone that they see on stage, and maybe that's the only role. Maybe you're not also doing smaller groups, or you're not the whole ministry leader or something like that. And so they only see you from that one to many, or you only see them from the one to many perspective. And they form a bond with you that isn't reciprocated. And then there's kind of a letdown when they realize that you don't know their name. And I mean, how can you? But last year when I was doing VBS, I had a little kid who's come up to me every day and he'd bring me his craft. And then he invited me to his house for dinner at the end of the week. And I'm like, how do I crush him? I can't crush him, but he's expecting me to want to come to dinner and, well, hey, I'd love to meet your parents. Where are they? Never did.
No. And you're so right. That's a great way to understand it. And so, if you're listening, especially in a larger church environment, or at a VBS or a kids camp, do your best to mingle with the kids. And if you're leading VBS and you're the one teaching, go play the games. Walk around the craft area, say hey to kids. Do your best to be present. Because it is, I mean, even as an adult, right? When you see a pastor preach and you're connecting, you're feeling that, oh, he's so great, she's so great, whatever it is. And then you meet them and they don't even look at you, or, they brush past you, they're passive.
Yeah.
Oh, hi. Oh, bummer. And so how much more for a kid? And so when you can get on their level before the service, during the service, even if it's, and I bet the sky was so blue, just like Ginger's dress is such a beautiful blue. I bet that's how pretty the sky was. And you may not know their name, but just like my friend over here in her beautiful blue dress, and find those ways to connect with the audience, because you're right. It being genuine, right? We don't need to fake. And maybe you're even acknowledging, hey, there's a big group in here and I may not know all of your names, and that way they know, hey, he, she does care.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of, and they go, oh, there are a lot of us, they may not know my name, but then when you're making those comments, right, it's genuine and it's helping them connect. That is such a good reminder, Steve. Putting the right people in the right places can really have a role in the success or failure of large group time. I think we've all been there when the wrong person was in the wrong seat and everything kind of went sideways. Any thoughts on that and how to make sure we're getting people in the right positions?
Yeah. This is a tough one because we want to take any warm body we can who will volunteer a lot of times. And somebody who's willing to get up in front of people is also more of a unicorn. But not everybody should be doing it. If people are interested in doing this, if your last successful interaction with a kid was telling it to get off your lawn, then maybe this isn't the role for you. I think the first criteria for anybody is that they love Jesus. And that also then comes with this earnestness of wanting to serve and potentially coming into the to the wrong role. But I think for a large group, I think what I would tell them, number one, is you need to really know the lesson. Like you were saying, sometimes the prep happens and you gave us some great tips for how to prepare. Part of it too, though, is just knowing that Bible story, knowing that you can extemporaneously speak about creation and not really have to reference everything. Now, I'm not saying that you have to grow up in church, go to Bible college, anything like that, because a lot of people that are serving in kids ministry are new to their faith and are using it as kind of the development. And that's awesome. I love that. But spend some time discipling yourself, if that makes sense. Like, get into the Word. So, for instance, here at the park, when we're doing our large group, typically what the format is, it's an intro video that's funny or clever or something that appeals to their imagination but relates to the story. Maybe it sets up a conflict, maybe it doesn't. An outro or a closing wrap-up video that wraps things up. But in the middle is a video of me teaching. If some churches, maybe that's how they want to teach it. They want to hit play and show the entire thing, and the kids watch me teaching a lesson. In my perfect world, that wouldn't happen. My perfect world, you'd take the script that we've written for that large group, and you would then make that your own. Because like you said, you know your kids way better than I do. I'm in Northern Virginia here, and we've got the nation's capital and mountains, and it's hot and humid today. But you could be in Idaho or South Dakota or Alabama. I don't know. You could be anywhere, and you know not just your demographic, but you know your kids. And so what I'd love for you to do is, if I'm telling a personal story of my mom and a book with a cat with ice cream, you tell your own story. Put that in there. But then here's the Bible lesson. Here's how we're going to tell the story of the woman at the well, or whatever it is. Take your Bible, go to that reference and look at it. And then use a study Bible or something. Look at what's really being, why is the story in the Bible? Why does Jesus want me to know this? And then what part is the kid going to have in this? Understand that, be confident in it, and then the script could become, I don't know, become scratch paper. It could become a framework or a reference, but you can really make this yours without having to rewrite it. All you're doing is just studying it and applying your life and your environment. And so, like, I mean, we'd love for you to use the videos. We built a beautiful studio, and we have cameras and all of that stuff, and have a lot of fun doing it. But in our perfect world, you're going to connect better with your kids than I ever will. Now, if you choose to use our videos, that's fine. I'm not trying to tell you that our product is terrible. We,
You're like opposite of selling. You're like, I actually don't.
No, I know. I'm so bad at this.
No, you're absolutely right though, because videos are great, and you guys bring those to the table because some churches may not have someone trained up who can do it well, and we want you to have something when the teacher calls out sick, or your kid's director's on maternity leave and you're going to need to have 6 weeks of curriculum that's covered. That's why it's there. But when you can come in and, like you said, use your connection. The beautiful thing about a large group script is it's theologically sound. If you're in alignment with the curriculum, it's been thought through, it's been written for a child's learning level. And that means you can give to a volunteer this script, and you can even send them the video. Hey, watch this video of Steve. He had some great techniques, right? And use it as a training platform so that then your volunteers can learn those skills on their own.
Yeah. Other things, I think you should be good at public speaking. And part of that, of course, is the preparation. The more prepared you are, the more comfortable you're going to be, the more credible you'll be. And I would also say, don't read it.
Please don't
reference notes, fine, but please don't read it. Now, if you're reading a story, kids love story time, and reading a book to kids, that's awesome. And also read directly from the Bible.
Come on.
Don't, I know as we age, some of us have to start wearing the cheaters, and I would just encourage you, get a large print Bible, something, actually read it from the Bible. Because like I said before, you need to be absolutely convinced that it's true as really any KidMin leader. And you may still be figuring it out. That's fine. But you need to believe that the Bible is God's word, and that what is coming out of there is his word, and not be like, well, obviously this doesn't apply. You need to really be convinced that it's true, and be, I think, grounded in your own faith, even if it's at an elementary level. Obviously we want you to grow, but if you're new to your faith and you're teaching kids, and you are, it's a gift that God's given you to do this, or a calling that's put on your life, don't walk away from it. Go do it. Have confidence that he's the one that's called you. Meet him in the process and be willing to grow. I'd love to say that you need to love kids, but to be honest, when I started this, I didn't love kids. I loved my kid. She's
Good
awesome.
place to start,
Yeah. But the day that God called me to serve in kids ministry, I said to him, I will do whatever you want me to do. I like to serve, but we started going to this church, and I was like, however I can help, I'll do anything. Except, of course, serving kids ministry. I mean, we both know that's crazy, God. So, I thought making coffee would be fun, or cutting the grass, or anything like that. But that was the day that he wanted me to work with kids. And so I think that's the most important part of my story, is that none of this can be about me. It all needs to be about his glory. So he didn't make me good at baseball. He didn't make me a great student. Of course, I had something to do with that myself. There's a lot of stuff he didn't make me good at. He made me good at talking to kids on a large group level. I can't take any credit. That isn't immodest, because I can't take any credit for that. Yeah. Every breath I take is a gift from him. And so this is something that he wants me to do, and that works in my environment. I need to be, I think step number one is be willing. And, but if people are willing to put in the preparation, and if they're good at public speaking and can, it's a real call, then I think they're probably good at it. I think you should be willing to have one awkward conversation with somebody rather than a million little awkward interactions. So if somebody is not cutting it, I think you just need to tell them in love. We've seen a couple of those disasters. But I've also gotten to, take things that I've learned from other leaders and pass those along to newer leaders. That's been a really fun thing. And they'll have completely different, if any of them actually listen to this, they'll be like, that's not how I do it. And that's fine. You said don't be fake. And I think that is so important because kids can smell fake a mile away. Don't pander to them for a reaction. And there was a fad that was really popular where kids would do a thing with both of their hands and repeat two numbers. And I would see leaders go out and do that to elicit the reaction. And I just kind of cringe a little bit inside because it would not, I think that's what ultimately robbed the fad of its power was when adults started doing it. So, but you'll never be as cool as a kid. And you don't need to be. Be yourself. Be that voice of authority, of credibility. You be a goofball, that's fine. But kids can't imagine that you were ever young, that you were ever their age. They see you as they love pointing out that I don't have hair. And so fortunately, I'm not really self-conscious about that. So no, I'm not at all, but it can be a device for me, but I'll never be as cool as they are, and they cannot ever picture that I had hair or ever went to school. I can tell them that, and they'll just be kind of incredulous about it. But I think the kind of the last thing on that is, so I minored in public speaking in college, and there's a verse, and it's a verse everyone knows. It's, I don't know, probably top 5 verses in the Bible just because it's from 1 Corinthians 13. And so we tend to look at something like 1 Corinthians 13 and think that it doesn't have any depth because it gets repeated in every secular wedding, and that's terrible. I mean, it's God's word. It has power. And for me, I love 1 Corinthians 13:1, where Paul says, if I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, of course we know he was an incredible orator. But if I don't have love, then I'm as a sounding gong or a clanging cymbal. And right outside of where I'm recording this today, there's a couple dumpsters in the back, and trucks will come and they'll dump those at the most inopportune times, usually when we're recording in the studio behind me. And it's just this incredibly loud noise. And I just think every time I hear that's what my message sounds like if it doesn't come from a place of love. Of course, we know as kids ministry leaders, the challenge that's put on us if we lead a kid astray. I mean, that's a pretty big penalty. Let's not go there. So let's start in love. Let's throw away our ego. Let's just step up to the call and let's just serve.
No, so good, and a beautiful way to close is that reminder that we do carry a spiritual weight. And anyone that you're allowing to teach on your platform, our church, we were very careful to call it a platform, not a stage, because it's not about you. It's not about your gifts, like you're saying. It's about the Holy Spirit working through you. And anyone that you're inviting to teach, to share, needs to be living in a way and willing to honor the Lord and to honor the Word of God as they teach, whether they're leading a game or having a worship moment or an altar call or a message. You need to make sure that that person's in alignment. I may have shared this in the podcast before, but one of my pastors, someone had told me, he did not tell this story, he's pretty humble, but we were talking about him and his incredible communication skills. And one of the team members said, well, before he speaks, he goes in the back and he kneels and he surrenders to the Lord, and then he goes out and teaches. And I won't tell you I do it every time, but I do try to do it because it's that moment, like you said, to go, this is not about me. This is not the gift that I have. I've prepared, right? I have planned. And now, Lord, you take it from here. And whether that's speaking to a group of 5 to 10 kids or 200 at a VBS or a CAM, surrendering that moment to the Lord. So 1 Corinthians 13, guys, go. That's your homework. Go read that and maybe work on memorizing that first verse because it's so good.
Well, people who are comfortable getting up in front of people, I love platform instead of stage, tend to be, well, sometimes they're actually very self-conscious, which is why when you meet the pastor and he's actually insecure, that happens a lot. Or it's people that are used to being in the spotlight.
Yes.
And it's so easy for there to be an ego there. And it is a constant reminder that number one, it is all about God, all about God. Number one, it's for his glory. And then it's all about those kids and it's their families, those volunteers, and it has nothing to do with me. Nothing.
Well, if you're listening, I hope that you gained some practical next steps and even the heart behind these large group opportunities and that the Lord has spoken to you. You're not alone if you've had some ups and downs. We've clearly made it obvious that it's not always cookie cutter. It's usually not when it comes to kids ministry. So you'll continue to experience challenges, even if you're applying all of these different things. But just remember that consistency wins as you help create a cultural environment that guides kids to thrive. Steve, we're so glad you're here. And if you're listening and you want to learn more about the park and this amazing new curriculum, the things that they offer, you can visit parklearning.com. Their team would love to chat with you. They'd love for you to check out the resources they have there. I do have to ask, Steve, I mentioned your favorite pet out of, if I'm
Oh,
doing the math, I think is it 10 pets? What would be your favorite? Is it 5, 2, and 3?
so, so I was always a cat guy.
Fair.
And then we got we started getting dogs, and now it's pretty, I can say I'm not a horse guy. I have my favorite horse. But right today, my favorite pet is Meatball. Meatball is a little old lady. She's a uh, pit lab boxer mix. And she's just this brown dog who's built like a tank or a meatball, but she's the sweetest thing in the world. And she knows she was rescued out of a pretty rough situation. And she is just so happy to have a family and to have people love her. And so she's just always happy. Meatball appreciates her family. So right today, I would say Meatball's my favorite pet.
That's amazing. Well, don't forget you can email support@kidsmatter.com for your free Kidman Academy class or visit kidmanacademy.com. Use the code podcast for 25% off tuition. Take a minute to like, subscribe, share this episode with one of your large group, teachers, volunteers. We'd love to have you leave a comment or review, and we will see you next time.